Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder. And our program today is about the longing for belonging, about wanting to be together, to group, to tribe, to connect with other people, to move away from that feeling of loneliness, to be part of something bigger. It seems to me it's a deep, profound desire inside of us all to be loved, loving, and lovable, and it's a whole lot easier to do that when there are other people around.
Yeah, there are those antisocial people, those so-called hermits, and we all know periods in our lives where we just want to be left alone. I'd also like to talk at some point about the difference between solitude and loneliness, because solitude can be a really wonderful thing, but we are social creatures. Not like ants or bees or herds or flocks are social. That seems to be driven on a herd mentality and instinct. I think the longing to belong in human beings is more heart-based. What did you say the other day? Less about survival, more about growth.
Yeah, I mean, we do still have within us that primitive desire to be part of a tribe, so we have somebody on our back at all times to keep the us safe from all the them. You got to realize, I mean, as little as 100,000 years ago, people lived in a small tribe, and everything else out there besides what was inside here was them and was dangerous and could at any moment attack, whether it's an animal or whether it's a group of other people in a different tribe. So there's us and there's them, and that was as little as 100,000 years ago. That's nothing in terms of the evolution of the brain itself. You know what I mean? Our brain's almost exactly the same as it was as little as a tiny speck in time 100,000 years ago. So we still have in us this desire, I think, to be part of the tribe, whether the tribe has evolved from family to extended family down into secular family, or whether it's a whole tribe of my religion or my club or my country. But people do have inside of them a primitive need to have a barrier between the us and all the other people, which is the them.
So we'll probably always have some sense of that, a defensive need to belong, but that the really sweetness of friendship or a romantic relationship that goes beyond just simple I'm attracted to you to something really profound, some merging, some giving up of the me in favor of an us, that kind of thing is really sweet and goes way beyond survival, I think. That, to me, is the longing to belong that I'd like to discuss a little bit today, because that would help us to mitigate everything from family disputes and arguments with your spouse all the way out to nuclear war. Look at team spirit, for example, or maybe even the Civil War. The fact that brother would fight against brother in the Civil War always intrigued me. Like, given the emotional connection to your family that's natural and sort of built in, how could some political issue like states' rights, for example, give you such a charge that you'd be willing to fight against your brother? And that happened in the American Civil War. It split families down the middle over what? States' rights? Slavery? Who's going to run the show? The local state capital or the federal government? And even today we see in politics and in religion the ability to do that. And then, as I said a moment ago, team spirit, that vast majority of people, whether they're rooting for high school, college, pro ball, the Olympics, whatever, people like to be on one side or the other. Very few people watch sports the way I do, which is, oh, that was a good play, regardless of which team did it, right? Oh, what a great hit, a home run, regardless of which team hit it. I don't care. I just like the action. People look at me like I'm crazy. Well, aren't you rooting for the hometown? And, well, I've lived in several cities. What do? Root for the Tigers because I used to live in Detroit, or root for the Dodgers because I used to live in Los Angeles? So there's something about this need to belong. To my way of thinking, clearly starts with a defense mechanism, protect me against danger, but goes way beyond that. That's what I'd like to better understand as we talk about this whole longing to belong.
Yeah, it starts with the moving away from danger feeling, the feeling I'm not endangered. But then once we hit neutral, once we hit like I'm not endangered anymore, now it's like greater and greater levels of feeling safe. Like moving in the positive way away from danger towards safer and safer and safer.
Or toward love.
Yeah, safe and love is the same basic concept here. The safer you feel, the more free from fear, more surrounded by love, the safer you feel. So the idea is now that we have our survival handled, we as human beings basically, we're not really in danger anymore. Now we can move with an empathy toward a greater quality of belonging, and we can pick our friends, we can choose the relationships, and we can move in a way to nurture them and to make them, the sweetest and most wonderful possible. We can choose who we want to belong to or who we want to belong with or belong inside of a group with. Because, again, we're all unique. Every human being is absolutely unique, but we do overlap in some wonderful ways. And when my interests overlap your interests, I probably enjoy hanging out with you more than I would enjoy hanging out with somebody who doesn't have any interests overlapping mine. Maybe not in an initial conversation, but over the long run. For example, when you and I met some 30-odd years ago, we both realized we'd never met another person who had the same interests, like overlapping as much as ours did. We'd read the same books. We were interested in the same people. We loved the same concepts.
Arrived at a lot of the same conclusions.
Yeah, a very independently in different kind of ways.
You were right. You agreed with me.
Yeah,
so
you were right. You agreed with me too. So we naturally, having our interests overlap, have created a relationship, a belonging together that we've nurtured for our whole lives. Lots of other people in my life I find interesting, and they've come and they've gone, but they didn't overlap as much as me. So we want to belong with people that fit with us, that are simpatico, that connect in a special way. I've only had a few relationships in my life like that. My one with my wife, and my one with you, and my one with my brother. I don't think I've ever had any other relationships quite as deep and as rich for three totally different reasons. But in each case, belonging with that person is a sense of commitment where the us matters more than the me. In every one of those cases, the us, of you and I, matters more than the me. Where we're going together matters more than my individual needs. And the same in my relationship with my wife, and the same in my relationship with my brother. I've evolved in those three relationships to the place where the relationship itself is so important in my life that it's not a sacrifice to always look to what's best for us before I look to what's best for me.
So the longing to belong, as we're discussing it here, that need to be part of a group, whether it's a group of two or all Dodger fans
right.
or whatever, that longing to belong is a quality of love. It just goes beyond romantic love to agape and all manner of, all the way out to you help me feel safe in the world. So are we saying then that in situations like politics, like the American Civil War, for example, or religion will divide family, or team spirit, sports will do it too, that's a case of fear trumping love or being an issue of such urgency that we are programmed to turn and deal with the fear and the confusion and sort of put our love interests on the side? I mean, in those situations, we'll give up the longing to belong to a primary unit, like my family, to become a member of this other unit, some political party or some sports team or some religion. To me, that's strange. It's almost like this classical philosophical battle between good and evil, between fear and love. That could be seen as a battle between good and evil. We have to ask ourselves, what motivates us, love or fear? I really think those are the only two motives.
And when we get that scared, when we get that terrified, I hate the term civil war. There's something civil about that war. The war between the states. I guess in the South they call it the war of northern aggression. That war it was so primitive, it became back to us and them. It went back to tribe versus outsider. The federal government was, if you're in the South, was the evil invader going to take our land, take our people, and we Southerners are only safe if we band together and fight against and become our own country. And the North is saying, you're ripping our country apart. You're trying to secede and get out. You can't do that. We've got to dominate and take you back over again. This was us and them. This was as primitive as it gets. I think that's what happens when we move into those kind of horrible situations where human beings do the worst things. It's because they behave like animals, and the animal behavior is a very primitive us versus them. It's the either-or mentality. It's the black or white. The more terrified we get, the more animal-like we behave. The less sane we become, and the more insane we become. So I think that it's really natural in something like the Civil War where the media, as it was, just pumped this thing up so big. This was like, our lives are going to be forever ruined if those Northerners come in, or our lives are going to be forever ruined if we let those Southerners take over. It's like parents were telling their children, go fight that war. In Vietnam, it wasn't as bad, but it was similar. I mean, there was a huge push for a lot of people to say, you go fight that war. It's like you don't belong. You're a traitor if you don't go fight that war. I mean, there's a huge media push. There's a social push to make us belong to things we don't even want to belong to.
I think what I'm hearing here is that there's a very clear difference, though it may be difficult to describe, between belonging to a group where we're all feeling love and an affinity and a sharing and a caring and value that we're stronger because of our numbers, as opposed to belonging to a group where what we share is our fear.
Exactly.
And so we may think we belong to a group of all frightened people, but in fact, every one of them is watching you and wondering. Right? Those are two different kinds of belonging, I think.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, one of the greatest belonging experiences I've ever had in a group was a group you and I and a few other people were part of. We called it Blanche for some reason. And it was like a group sharing thing. We'd get together and we'd talk about our deepest emotions and our feelings, and we'd help each other. And it was a small group of friends, and it was like a mastermind group or a self-improvement group. We did it for a few years.
It was a group of therapists.
Therapizing each other,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. But it was something I wouldn't miss. It's like we always made it. We always showed up. It was a real sense of belonging, and it was something bigger than myself. It's a small version of what we're talking about here, but it was a deep sense of belonging. I had a time in my life when I had a live and learn, had a dozen, 15 employees, and we had a family kind of feeling, and there was a real sense of belonging. I haven't had a whole lot of that in my life, but there are those moments. But on the grand sense, though, the belonging to the United States of America as one of the citizens of the greatest country that ever, I have lots of those, or being a Jew and being connected to all the heritage, the Jewish people that have ever lived. There's a lot of grandiose senses of belonging, and as big as the one of being proud of being a member of the human race itself. So belonging is a feeling we can get in touch with, we can connect with, but it's always two things, I guess. It's always a matter of choice. You're never forced into it. It's a real, true, higher self-belonging is always a matter of choice, and it's a matter of love, passion. It's a matter of, this is what I want. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to think about and do and be.
And this clearly is not an either-or, but a matter of degree. Again, why is it so difficult for us to want to belong to humanity, to one planet, one people? Well, I suppose there's a legitimate fear that we would lose our diversity. I think that's something we need to look at as we become increasingly one planet, one people, solving together global problems, is to honor the diversity and, you would say in politics, the sovereignty, certainly, of those nations. But you could have both. And yet, seems to me that it's fear that causes people to fall back to a more basic group. So if I'm afraid of the world working together, oh no, one world government, big brother, it would be communists or fascists. It would have to be extreme, right? They fall back to nationalism. But if your federal government begins to look too much like Big Brother, then you talk about states' rights. And then you want to get control of your schools, so you say these are local schools and the curriculum needs to be decided in the community. And then the family says, oh no, I don't want you teaching my kids about this or that. This topic should be taught in the home. And look at this whole...
And the kid says, I'm going to decide what I'm going to learn anyway.
I'll figure it out. Right? You've got this concentric circle, and I think we're moving out toward being more inclusive.
Yes.
Right? Like I said before, the sports fan that actually loves action no matter whose team it is. Like when you watch the Celtics and the Lakers back in the day, when it was Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And I remember you introduced me to NBA basketball. And you were a Lakers fan. But were you such a Lakers fan that it depressed you emotionally to see the Celtics win a game?
Certain games, for sure. Like the one that ended the championship. That ended the playoffs, yeah, absolutely.
What about at the beginning of the season, though?
I'll tell you what, I'm a big Lakers fan then, I'm a big Lakers fan now. I loved watching the Celtics of the Larry Bird era. I loved watching Larry. What I didn't like is watching the Celtics beat the Lakers. I never liked watching the Celtics beat the Lakers. I liked watching them play really, really great and lose. That's what I liked watching. I appreciated the way they played. I wanted them to lose.
Let's say you moved to Boston in the midst of that. What would you do? Would you remain a Lakers fan, or would you put on the green and white?
How old was I when I moved to Boston? How long had I been a Lakers fan? I started being a Lakers fan at 8. 1960. I saw, 8 years old, right? So like, how old was I? If I was 10 and moved to Boston, I'd become a Celtics fan. If I was 16 and moved to Boston, I'd have stayed a Lakers fan. No doubt about it. If I was like...
So any older than 16, no matter where you live...
I'm still a Lakers fan, and I live in remote Maui, so yeah. Past 16, past those days, I was going to be a Lakers fan and a UCLA Bruins basketball fan for the rest of my life, no matter where I ever lived.
And do you think that sense of belonging enhances for you the game?
Oh, yeah. Because I really don't like watching when the Celtics play anybody but the Lakers. I'm not really a basketball fan. I'm a Lakers fan. I mean, I appreciate the game of basketball. I like watching highlights maybe, but to sit through a whole game where neither team is my team is something I rarely do. Even rarely in the playoffs do I do that.
How do you account for that?
Well, because...
Nobody on the Lakers knows who you are. They don't care.
Well, that's true. I did sit next to Magic Johnson once in an airplane, but you're right. They don't care. I care. I'm part of that. I belong to the cadre of Lakers fans, and when I walk through the airport in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I see somebody wearing a Lakers shirt or a Lakers hat, I give them a nod. I give them a wink. Thumbs up, boy, you're wearing my Lakers shirt. Hey, how'd Bynum do this week? So yeah, it's a thing. It's an emotional connection you have with anybody, anywhere that is part of that thing. It's like people who have Corvettes. Whenever you're driving down the road and you see somebody else with a Corvette, it's thumbs up, boy. You got taste, You're like me. I feel safe because in some way you're on the same side I'm on. You're in the same group I'm in. You're in the same tribe. It comes down to that primitive feeling again of like, I know I'm safe with you because you think like me. You seem to be like me in some wonderful, magical way.
See, the allegory of sports and war, I think, is pretty clear. Initially, I think Olympics Games 2,000 years ago were first promoted for that very reason, to sort of take the war out of people, somewhat anyway, and get them settled down. But you look at just how strongly people feel about their sports team. And again, we've mentioned the same thing in religion and politics as well. It's just remarkable how strong that need is. Soccer, for example. There was an item on the broadcast news a couple of weeks ago. It showed a female soccer player. They call it football in Europe, right?
Everywhere else, but
every place but here, it's called football. Yeah. But she just threw down this other player by her ponytail, I think, or grabbed her.
I saw that on the news.
Oh my God! It was like a woman that did that, and it's enough to see men do that, but then to see women allow themselves, they have very little testosterone, right? They don't have that impulse that men have in that kind of, they don't have that killer instinct by and large. But
no, usually it moves into a bonding instinct, and that's just not exactly what happened there.
But soccer games, people riot and kill each other over, or these so-called celebrations after an NFL or NBA championship is won, where people go out and burn cars and stuff. I mean, that's a perverse belonging, it seems to me.
The mob psychology thing is a little bit of a weird thing in terms of human behavior, because we do things when we join a mob, when the momentum gets started, that we would never do
that
otherwise.
Is a different kind of belonging.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's the being overtaken by the emotion of the thing and not thinking rationally quite frequently. But we're talking the higher level of belonging is kind of like a combination of a rational decision, like I want to belong to that. It makes sense to me. I've thought it through. It looks like this is what I want to do. And this emotional experience of I hunger to be with people that feel like that. I feel like that. I want to be around other people that feel like that have that same passion, that have that same focus and have that same passion, have that same focus, passion as I do. And so what's cool about humans, because virtually every other animal has to group itself for survival. That's and we are past that, and to a great extent. We can now group ourselves for growth, success, and fulfillment, and therefore choose who we want to belong with. And that evolves too, because I remember when I grew up, I lived in the same neighborhood for many, many years until all the way through high school, and so the kids I belonged to were geographically chosen. It was the one next door and the one 3 doors down, because anybody else was way too geographically undesirable, too difficult to get to. But as soon as I got wheels, as soon as I got my car, then all of a sudden I got to choose which friends from my high school and which friend I wanted to go hang with. And at that point, life started to get, for the first time, to the point where you got to choose who you wanted to belong with, which clubs you wanted to join, or which groups you wanted to hang with, or which hangouts you wanted to hang out at, because the other people that hung out at that hangout you liked too. I think that's where it begins, and the safer we feel, the less imperiled we feel, the more we get to choose who we want to belong with.
So that old love your neighbor axiom from Confucius and Moses and Christ, and I think all prophets have said the same thing. It sort of begs the question, how far up the block does your neighbor go? And ideally, it should be the world. But as we said before, that's difficult for some people.
Yeah, science fiction writers always said what it would take is an invasion from another planet. If somebody invaded from another planet, then the whole world would come together, because we are now all us, and the them is somebody besides the people on Earth.
Or just seeing yourself as one planet.
Yeah.
Remember in the late 60s, we start getting these shots of the Earth from the moon?
Yeah.
The first pictures.
Amazing. I remember that feeling.
It's like all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I'm already in outer space.
That's right. I'm on that ball down there. Wow.
I'm in outer space as much as if I were on Mars or in a different galaxy. It's all, wow, there we are, that blue marble. And it did impact us for a while. Remember Earth Day?
Sure.
1970.
Yeah, things have changed since those days, in some good ways and in some bad ways.
Yeah. That global consciousness didn't last very long. And again, I think it's pretty easy for us to be manipulated by those who would use fear to keep us divided. I saw it in the union. When I was in the United Auto Workers, I was 18 years old. It was the summer before my freshman year at college, and I thought, well, I better make some money for school, right? And I'm working in the union, and I could see how management would drive wedges between the union workers, usually based on race, more often than not. And then later in broadcasting, AFTRA, they would do the same thing. The union would try to come in and negotiate with a particular company to unionize this shop, and the company would always go to the most highly paid DJs and news people, like the morning guy and the afternoon drive guy, give them extra money so that they would work against the union, and always keep us divided and powerless like that, whether it was this blue-collar union in the foundry where I worked or a more professional kind of union in a trade like broadcasting. Beware, I say, of those who would seek to divide us, to use fear to keep us divided. They've got some agenda, some benefit in keeping us at each other's throats. And yet the natural tendency, I think, is to move from the inside out radiating out, rippling out from identifying, as you said, only with the kids that lived in your neighborhood around that grade school. And then it got a little bigger when you went to middle school, probably. And then, you got your bike, you could ride a bigger area. And then your car, as you say, I think it's a very good point. And to go out to the world and say, humanity is my family, but I also honor the differences. And I want it all. I want to belong to these specific groups, this particular form of religion, this particular angle of politics, right? This mission in society to accomplish this or that. But at the same time, and maybe primarily, I see myself as a citizen of the world.
And so that would take consciousness. That would take awareness. You are a citizen of the world. I mean, it's not like that's debatable. It's just, are you willing to take that moment in time it takes to stop life and think, oh, I'm a citizen of the world. I am part of all of humanity. I think just that awareness makes you feel like you belong. I mean, it's there all along. The feeling of belonging to humanity, the feeling of belonging to men if you're a man, or women if you're a woman, the feeling of belonging to lots and lots of things like your religion and your country, and all those things are there. We get to experience them if we want. But the highest sense of belonging, to me, the highest sense of belonging is that magnetic quality that brings lovers together, or best friends together, or best colleagues together, or just that creates magical small groups of people, of humanity, that come together and do marvelous things together. And I think you have to feel totally safe to be able to just let go of the fears, pretty much work through the fears of belonging and do I belong, and understand that your heart will guide you more than your head. Your heart will guide you to the people that you will feel that sense of belonging, that sense of loneliness dissipate, that sense of connection, that sense of simpatico, that sense of oneness. There's so many different names, but that concept of this is what I'm supposed to be with you, doing this. We're supposed to be here together doing this. The safer you feel, the more you let go of your thoughts and trust your heart, the more I think you just move in that direction.
Well, Steve, you say there's no denying that we're part of the global family, that we're all members of that group that is humanity. And yet, in this country in particular, there is this sense of superiority. I think the politically correct term that conservatives use is American exceptionalism, which is essentially, we're better than you. We are 5% of the world, the United States of America, 5% of the world, but we spend more on war and so-called defense than the rest of the world combined. And we hold that up as evidence of our superiority and our exceptionalism. So I'm just saying there is a strong resistance, at least in this country, to also being members of the world community. We've heard the conservatives say, what is Obama apologizing for? And then Obama bowed to the Emperor of Japan the other day, and the conservatives, so what is he bowing to those people for? And their real issue is, why are we going from unilateral behavior, and the Bush-Cheney administration will do whatever the hell we want, to multilateralism? And somebody who has just a little bit of schooling could explain, because it's in our mutual interest. Everybody benefits. And I think these guys are saying, no, we'd rather have only America benefit, regardless of what happens to the rest of the world. The best way to honor and promote this longing to belong, to promote love, in a sense, is to promote safety, to help people feel safe. Then they can be part of the bigger group. But if you want people not to be part of the bigger group, then as a politician or an opinion maker of some sort, you're going to want to make them feel unsafe to keep people divided and against each other. It's like, where is your motive? What do you really... I say beware of those who are trying to frighten you. It may be a legitimate concern. Your mom and dad just want you to be safe, right? But generally speaking, when institutions come after you with fear, saying, trust us, we'll handle this, but you ought to be afraid. We're on permanent yellow alert, right? Or orange alert or whatever. I guess the airports are on permanent orange alert. We fight a war against terror now, we're told, as if that could ever be won. So that's a euphemism for permanent global war. We're going to declare war against the tactic, terrorism. So that means we'll always be at war. That means we'll always be afraid. Let me see. Who would that benefit? If we're going to talk about the longing to belong, we have to understand the agenda of those who are trying to divide us and make better choices about where do we draw these rather arbitrary lines of division. So the longing to belong is love, and that which prevents that or causes a resistance to honoring the longing to belong is fear.
Yeah. And so it's not how much the fear is pushed at us, it's how much of it we don't release, don't process through and release. The media, I mean, every newspaper, every television show, it's all about fear. It's all about promoting fear. They sell news by selling bad news. And politics is all about, they're bad, we're right, they're wrong, we're right. And religion is all about you're going to go to hell if you don't, and if you're not one of those, you aren't going to go to heaven. I mean, all of that is about promoting fear. It's all about promoting fear, and it's all based on that same primitive stuff. But we can, and all of us to some extent, do rise above that kind of belonging, that kind of belonging because I'm endangered if I am not surrounded by, say, those kinds of people,
there you go,
to the kind of belonging that is like, I don't have to belong to those people. I want to belong to those people. I aspire to belong to a group of those people. And that's a higher level, as we started the show with. That's that level of belonging, which is heart-driven, which is higher self-oriented, which is, it's all about, I feel safe enough to let go of needing to belong or needing to not belong and just allow myself to belong where I really long to belong.
Yeah, why can't we have global exceptionalism? Why does it have to be national exceptionalism? I'm really offended by this whole idea of American superiority.
I hear you, although you can bring the whole world together just by telling people that were we or were we not descended from apes? Oh, no, definitely not. Well, then all humanity is one thing. Now, why is America different than any other place? Or, take that step. Why is New York in America? Or why is Manhattan in New York? I mean, it's just a sense of pride in belonging that is festered by and fed by the media and by this huge nationalism push. Why? Because the more America buys into the hype of being the greatest nation in the history of the planet Earth and the most powerful, the safer we Americans get to feel. The more we see that the rest of the world is, you can walk into some place with a bomb attached to you in someplace else in the world, but they don't do that here because, we're safer here. Somehow we Americans have this magical thinking going on that we're safer here. And so to some extent, because so many people think so, it's pretty much been true. I mean, 9/11 being that rare black swan in the mix, the rest of the world's been attacked historically by neighbors much more than we have.
So again, said a different way, there's a big difference between I belong and you don't, and I belong and, hey, come and join us if you'd like. Those are two very different kinds of belonging. Like, I belong because I'm afraid to a group of people that are all afraid. And we're a little afraid of each other, but not nearly as afraid as we are of those that have brought us together.
Right, the other
fear.
them. Yeah.
Right, them, whoever they are. As opposed to, we just all belong because we're stamp collectors and we love stamps.
Right.
And we're not opposed to the coin collectors, but they just don't understand how wonderful it is to collect stamps.
But at least they understand what collecting's all about. It's those non-collectors that drive them most crazy. The people that don't really get collecting at all. That's the one they don't understand.
So it has a dark side, this need to belong. If it's, I'm belonging to a group to defend ourselves against this other group that we don't belong to, that's very different than just this growing sense of belonging as humanity realizes the other half of the golden rule, I think, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's the part people forget. So if you despise yourself, if you have low self-esteem and you don't really like who you are, then you expect your neighbor to treat you badly, so you treat your neighbor badly, and that becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. We've got to learn to love ourselves and know that we're worthy of being members of these groups and allow ourselves to move in that direction. Know that we're human, we all have talents and gifts, we all have flaws and wrinkles and warts too, so let's just sort of accept that and learn to be safe and unafraid. I think that's part of the longing to belonging, is dropping our fear, learning that there's really nothing here to fear necessarily. There's no reason for us to be afraid, especially as we understand knowledge is the antidote to fear. It's not really safety. It's information that creates safety. It's understanding that creates safety, not bigger guns and bigger bombs and more. I was thinking the other day, why are we still building battleships in the 21st century? Is it against the Al-Qaeda battleships that we're worried about? I mean, what nation are we going to fight at sea with battleships? As if it's like the 19th century. And
well, when you're educating children the same way they educated children in the 19th century, what do you expect them to come up with,
And if your business is building battleships, then you're going to bring lobbyists in to make sure that... But again, the point of bringing all of this up is not to make a political statement, but to help us all be ever vigilant when people are trying to frighten us. What is their agenda? Is it somebody that really cares for you, expressing a concern about your safety that is understandable and legitimate, or somebody that's working a program that has an investment that they want to grow, that is working a program of money or power to keep us divided and against each other, and then we lose that sweet longing to belong.
Yeah, so be conscious of the positives and the negatives involved in those things like nationalism and the us against them.
Jingoism.
Yeah, all those kinds of things.
Militarism.
But clearly be able to separate between the kind of belonging where I belong because I have to, or somebody makes me feel like I'm in danger if I don't belong, versus the kind of belonging that you're really following a longing where you want to be. The belonging where your heart is longing to be takes you where you belong. So that's what you need to do, and you need to feel safe to go there. You need to feel safe, and you need to go there from a place not of high stress, not of high input. You need to go there from a place of inside yourself, a place, well, we've labeled paradise, a beautiful place, technically called the alpha brainwave state, a place where you're only thinking about and feeling one thing at a time. Your mind is slow, your body is free attention, your emotions are calm, you're not confused, rather you're clear and focused. It's really a wonderful daydream-like place, and it can be used, as many do every day, to space out, but it can also be used in a really very wonderful, specific way to space in. And to me, that always begins with a couple of things. It starts with the safe feeling, but it involves closing your eyes and cutting out all the input that comes in through the eyes. So much of the input does. And then, of course, letting the mind know it's safe with one slow, conscious, deep breath. Take that with your eyes closed. One more slow and conscious, deep breath. And as you release, feel the peace that comes in paradise.
To experience and promote the longing to belong, you must feel safe. You must train the brain or convince the mind, persuade your emotional nature as well, to feel calm, tranquil, undisturbed. In as many ways as you can imagine. Even time needs to be of less importance for the next 6 or 8 minutes. That's all you need to know. The time is not very important. We'll let you know when that period is up. What if it just sort of stood still for you? Time, that is, right now. And there was No place else you needed to be, nowhere else you'd rather be than sitting comfortably right now, imagining yourself in a beautiful, beautiful place. Maybe outdoors with shade trees, open sunny meadows, cool, dark, forested places too, some running water or a little lake. You dream it up. And imagine sitting on a log or a tree stump, a rock, or maybe a grassy spot beneath a shade tree, feeling so very safe and open to the longing to belong.
And you know you belong here. And you know you belong now. Here. Now. You belong. You belong to this universe of energy and matter, all as you are one. You belong to this planet, this beautiful planet. You are part of it, along with everyone. Feel that sense of belonging, that sense very strong that this is the place, here and now, where it feels oh so right and much to your delight. You really feel like you belong. Not so much think you belong, not so much reason it out, but that feeling of being sure, of having no doubt, of knowing this is right, of knowing you are there. The feeling. It's everywhere. And when you feel like you belong, it feels ever so strong. Feel it. Feel it inside. Feeling that resembles some other kinds of feelings. One of them could be happiness or pride or confidence or safety or powerful or at choice. It comes with a feeling, a picture, a voice, but it's very clear. It's very strong. That right now, right here, I belong.
Your awareness of yourself and the environment around you, that awareness itself is magnetic. And while physical magnetism, like bar magnets in grade school, remember opposites attract, but when it comes to consciousness, to the energy of spirituality, to awareness itself, like attracts like. As we discussed recently in the program on the law of attraction, you attract what you put your attention on. The longing to belong suggests a desire to belong to something you like, to a group of individuals perhaps, to a circumstance or situation or series of opportunities where you feel safe. That's what you like about it. You feel safe to like the people you like because they're like you. But then this unfolds and evolves and gently radiates out into the world where you can overlook arbitrary differences, the ones that might have caught your eye initially, but which sooner or later are seen as irrelevant. and your longing to belong, as you feel increasingly safe with it, expands to include ever greater groups of people. People just like you, people who are like you in many ways, people who live near you, your community, your nation, nationalism, but not to the exclusion of the world. For self-interest is not limited to the separated self. There is a more refined version of self-interest, a higher self that sees itself as part of that community, part of that nation, and part of that world. And that very sense of self expands as you honor, by promoting safety in your life and the lives of others, your longing to belong.
So you can belong with people who long to belong with people like you. If you listen to your heart, that's where you must start. You'll find out what's inherently true, which is that people who like you, people who are like you, people who you like too, are the people who long to also belong with people just like you. So like attracts like, and as you relax and feel safe, that's just what you'll do. You'll find you attract people who long to belong with people like you. So become the kind of person you wish to attract. Become the behaviors you seek. Become the kind of person who has that feeling, that tact, that ability to be who they want to be. And become that person, and what you'll do is attract people who become that kind of person too. And that's where you'll find you belong the best, with people like you, where you can sort of make a nest, where you can come together and create a space where you feel safe all the time. It's a wonderful place, and it's home, or it's family, or it's friends, or it's the hangout site. It's just some place where your heart feels right, where you feel like you belong. And the longer you spend with the friend, the more the feeling of belonging gets strong.
Learning through relaxation to feel safe in your own skin leads to those wonderful feelings of safety as you're embraced by your partner, by your family, your community, your nation, safe in the world. Can you imagine a time where all people are safe to be anywhere in the world and feel safe because they are safe, and then safe in the universe? Maybe the universe itself is not nearly as dangerous as it might seem, just confusing. And it's the unknowns, the confusion, that which we have yet to understand, that generates the fear, that causes us to resist the longing to belong. We'll turn it around. What if the universe were really, really safe? By all appearances, there is integrity here in the universe. Maybe human systems are not always reliable, but nature has integrity. You can rely on her. There are laws at work in nature that demonstrate wholeness and integrity, strength. You are safe in the universe. Let that trickle down into your life, into all of your relationships. The longing to belong comes from you accepting how truly safe you really are.
For after all, you do belong in the universe. Where else would you be? You belong in the universe, and in the universe you can be free to be with whoever you desire to see. Evolve beyond needing to belong to a group to keep you safe, to allow yourself to choose to belong where you feel powerful and great. Listen to your heart. That's where to start. To belong. First become, and then allow. So with that feeling of belonging beating strongly in your heart, take a deep breath, and as it feels comfortable for you, bring yourself back to wide awake. Back to wide awake, still belonging, perhaps a little more wide awake than less narrow awake, but feeling of belonging persists.
And while I work on Steve to get him to be a better Celtics fan without giving up his identity with the Lakers, do the same thing in your life, okay? Let's all of us work toward being more inclusive.
I'll be a Larry Bird fan. How about that?
Oh, it's okay with me.
It's a step.
It's okay with me. Be a fan of greatness, right? Sort of like watching the Olympics. You lose track of what country they're from. Doesn't matter. Isn't that cool? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that far out? Doesn't excellence touch you somewhere deep inside and make you feel loved, loving, and lovable, make you feel safe and proud to be a member of the human race or to be an athlete or to even care about such things? Oh, we've talked about a lot of different areas of your life. You put it together, let it apply to you, and share these programs with your friends. I want to remind you that whenever you log into focusedpassion.com, you'll have not only the built-in player where you can hear all of your programs, and your collection will always be there. Even if somehow your computer messes up, those programs will always be there for you. You get a new hard drive or a new computer, bang, they're right back in your podcast folder. But in addition to the built-in player, there's also this cool little send one to a friend gadget, and we encourage you to use it. Doesn't cost a nickel. Send these programs as often as you'd like to people that you know who would benefit from them, and see what happens. You'll feel good. They'll appreciate it. We love it, and it's part of the service we like to provide with your support and your interest at focusedpassion.com. So it's easier than having to write newsletters to your friends. We do it for you. Just bring an email address and a good intention with you and send these out to your friends.
Yeah, we'll tack one on to every Christmas present you send this year. It's send one to a friend, give them the program that will help them solve their problems or heal their hearts. You know, that's what it's all about. We've got over 100 programs available. One of those, I'm sure, will be just perfect for your Uncle Fred or your cousin Sarah. So send one to a friend, do something nice for someone else because, of course, it's in your best interests, makes you feel better about your higher self as well.
So thanks again for being with us. We hope you're in the holiday spirit, had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and you're looking forward to the end of the year holidays. And as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.